Good afternoon to everyone. It's great to see you all joining from all these different areas. We want to first thank you for joining our webinar today. We know things are challenging right now, to say the least. So we're glad, hoping everyone's staying safe and healthy, and we're glad you're on. As we all navigate these unprecedented circumstances, we know there are a lot of new challenges in working from home, working with students remotely. So we hope you find this webinar informative and helpful. My name is Ron Gibbs, and I'm with Graduation Alliance. We're excited to have Dr. Scott Solberg lead today's webinar on the importance of social-emotional learning and resiliency at home in this new environment. As you can see on the screen, Dr. Solberg is a professor with Boston University with a background in counseling psychology. He has experience as a licensed psychologist specializing in treating anxiety disorders. He's currently collaborating with education systems to more effectively prepare all youth to graduate with the skills they need to find work and life success. And there's a lot more detail and information on that in his recent book, Making School Relevant with Individualized Learning Plans. Dr. Solberg's research focus is on resiliency and how setting career and life goals helps youth and adults become proactive, adaptable, and resilient for managing future uncertainty and life challenges, and that really is exactly what we'll be focusing on today. So before I hand it over to Dr. Solberg, I'll again mention that chat box, which again it looks like everyone's located. As we go through, Scott may ask for some comments as we go through, and use that chat box. At the end, Dr. Solberg will open it up to Q&A, and we'll primarily use that chat box for questions at that time. We will also send out a link to some of the resources that Dr. Solberg will be going through and talking about during this webinar. So we will provide some follow-up, including a link to access those resources. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Dr. Scott Solberg.
All right, thank you. Okay, so very excited to have this opportunity. So, I really want to thank you all. Yesterday we had about 500 registered. Today was about 650 people. So this is obviously a topic with a tremendous range of interest from educators, parents. We have researchers. If you're watching live or later via recording, we're just really are hoping that the kind of resources we're going to talk about is really going to be helpful. A lot of you that are on today are school counselors, which is very exciting. This is testimony to the fact that you are all rising to this challenge of how we're going to support our students in this new COVID kind of era. You're working to really be the support, the kind of wraparound supports for not only our students, but our families, our other educators. I was just talking with Marcia, who's a deputy superintendent from Boston Public Schools yesterday, and she just expressed how remarkable it is to see and really for her to learn the value of what school counseling is bringing, because you are all in her district as well, just standing up to all of the different challenges without question. We've got a number of people that are state leaders on board. Donna from Kansas. We have CASEL involved. CASEL is the Collaborative on Academic and Social Emotional Learning. Donna and Melissa from CASEL are here, and they've got some amazing resources, and we have them listed at the bottom of our resource page. This resources that you'll be getting from our Google Doc is about 7 pages of all of the things we'll be talking about today. So as we're going through things and you're saying, I want to see that, you should have access to that document. Finally, just a shout out to all of our colleagues from around the world that are joining. We've got Angela from Romania, Farid from Turkey, Gloria from South Africa, Yosta from the UK. I've got a couple from Padova. I know Teresa's on there, but I don't know if Leah was making it as well, and other countries that have come in that I just didn't get a chance to see who was involved. So this is, again, we're part of a big family now. I know it's been a big challenge in the U.S., but we're a big family trying to figure out how we're going to cope. So as you see from the piece here, we're going to be talking, the objectives that we're going to go through today are listed here on the piece. We do want questions as we go through, so please use the chat box. I'll ask you to respond a couple of times as well. But the big key in terms of what we're going to focus on today, taking a look at the COVID process is one of grief and loss, and so we'll talk about that as a framework. We'll also talk about the signs related to trauma, so we can encourage making sure we get those, our adults and our loved ones, the kind of professional support they might need. I want to use Hopeful's conservation of resources as a way of framing our experience, and then we're going to go right into how we can help support each other as well as our children and our youth around this process. So, so what is it that, you know, as we look at this COVID, it's been incredibly devastating, right? And one of the things we want to look at is sort of what it is that's making it so problematic. And the first is that it's disruptive, right? It's disrupting our daily routines. It's disrupting our access to food. It's the living settings. We have people that are living in small places that are needing to manage with roommates. Employment insecurity throughout the world, and certainly in the United States, it's front and center, the amount of unemployment that's going on. There's food insecurity, all kinds of things that are happening. And so I think we have to focus on the fact that there is this kind of grief and loss. There we go. I'm hoping we can find ourselves kind of in these pictures. This is kind of taking a look at the grief response from a more, you know, just a softer perspective before we go into the big details. We still have someone, I think, some background noise. Is that, Ron, are we able to mute them?
There
we go. Thank you. So, so anyway, so this is kind of like a funny picture. Go ahead and use the chat box to tell us which of these pictures kind of represents your personal emotional state, right? I know for me as a professor who's trying to get so many things done, I'm probably this lower left where I'm running as fast as I can at times. But then I'm also, there's moments when I'm like in the scream. I'm just like in shock and can't believe all of the things that are going on. Yep, the girl in the lower right is one that's a big one as well. I think the sense of just the loss, and I really feel so much for our colleagues from Italy and certainly Spain, where the death rate became so big, and now it's here for us in the United States, and that sense of, oh my gosh. But yeah, how about that anger, huh? I mean, I think that sense of, oh my God, I'm ready to go, I'm just screaming, and that need for a good meltdown once in a while is certainly part of the process as well. And I think for some of us, this happens within 15, 20 minutes. We can go through all four of those. So I think we need to help ourselves, and I know we've got a number of school counselors on, and we have some parents, but all of us, we need to think of this in terms of a grief response. I believe that these are not stages, they're more phases. I think we can be angry and accepting at the same time. I think we can be feeling very sad and lost while we're also trying to figure out how we're going to cope and make things happen. But thinking about these as a normal response to a major tragedy, which is what we're going through with COVID-19, I think is really important, that we're not blaming ourselves. We're going to be looking at it as something that we're all moving through. And I know it because I can feel it in my conference calls with colleagues. You can feel the tension. I can see the faces on my students. There's no doubt that this is a very trying time. And so let's use the grief response. But then also, we also need to recognize that there are times for some of us where this is actually much more traumatizing than it is grief. And when we flip to that trauma, and I think this is where school counselors, you've got to be aware of this, because we know we're going to have a very trauma-informed process, not only for the youth who may be losing family, who may be their parents out of a job, the uncertainty, but certainly as they make the switch back next year, next fall, even if we're not able to get right into classrooms and the challenges there, we're going to have a lot of clinical features of trauma that we need to be ready for. And we really need to reach out as adults, first of all. We've got a model that we're going to get help if these things are happening. So if you're feeling the sadness and it's not going away, keeping you from being able to get up and get your work done and feel engaged. The irritability is huge, and that sense that I can't get off that sense of agitation. The intrusive thoughts we'll come back to in terms of the worrying, but just all of these pieces, we've got help here. And in our resource list, you're going to see the psychologist locator, Mental Health for America. There are lots of people who can help. We've also got, unfortunately, and I know we've heard about this, we've got a rise in domestic violence happening right now. So if you know or you feel like there might be something, please make sure this is up and front and center on your own resources, that there is a hotline available. We've also got issues around unemployment, as we've heard. It's everywhere. It's rampant. It's millions and millions of people. So certainly there's resources that we can support on that. I'll be doing another workshop on that specifically for adults around that. So that'll be happening at a later time. But I think we just need, there's a lot of reasons why people are going to be feeling a sense of the trauma and the sense of needing help. So just wanted to use that as part one just to remember that we are in a crisis, and I don't want to move away from that. I do want to start thinking about the steps we can begin taking collectively to address it, but I also want to recognize and really reach out to those that are suffering and recognize the need for finding that support. Okay, so now we're going to move into part two, and part two is really about the fact that we know, and now that for most of us in the United States where schools are now being closed for the rest of the year, we know it's going to be a lot longer, that we're going to be in, stuck in this kind of feeling of captivity. We got to start making the most of this, right? And I think what I want to focus on is Hobfull's conservation of resources, because his model of stress is all about how do we build the resiliency to manage what is going on within the space we have, within our resources and whatnot. And the idea here is that what makes an event so stressful, why the loss is happening, is because it's not clear that we have the resources needed to manage the situation. And if we can begin focusing on how we, as individuals, as caregivers, as educators, as parents, if we can begin thinking about how we can begin developing some of the confidence and to be able to engage in some of these resources and getting access to it, that actually develops a sense of resiliency. It helps us realize, wow, I can manage, right? And so I want to frame it as an issue of looking at resources. Getting mental health support is a resource. If you've been on medication in the past, it may be time to get back on it, because that's a resource to help support us through the challenges and the stress that we're going to be naturally experiencing through this. The other kinds of resources, what we're going to talk about in part two. If you want to go to the next slide. So we want to focus now with the concept of self-care and resiliency. So want to make sure I've got plenty of notes here, and I don't want to keep going too fast to forget some of the neat thoughts I had on here. But anyway, resiliency is about being able to rely on, develop, and gain access to these resources. That's what we're talking about from the Hobfull's model, and that when we do, we actually experience less stress around these kinds of situations. So self-efficacy, as we know, and those of us that are working in the profession know, this is an emotional and set of skill resources that we use when we're managing any kind of situation. And that's where resiliency and self-efficacy came from, was in response to challenging situations. We can't really be good caregivers. We can't be good educators until we start doing the self-care that we're needing. And what I want to call out, I know I had it down here later, but just to remind ourselves around, when you're on an airplane, the first thing they talk about if the pressure goes down, the masks are going to fall down to the ceiling, and what's the first thing they say? Put the mask on yourself before your children. Take care of your needs. Do your own self-care before we reach out and start supporting others. And I think that theme of being in this kind of crisis where we need to do that is certainly the plan we're gonna take on this. Next step, next one. So what I'm using here is APA did a beautiful piece on how do we deal with the unknown, right? And these are some of the tips. And I'm taking these and I'm going to be putting resources and ideas and thoughts behind each of these as we go through the process. So really nice publication if you want to get that or add that to your list of resources for your own community. Really nice piece. But let's go right into the first one of being kind to ourselves. We have to be patient with ourselves. Really important, right? I know that we've had past epidemics like SARS. Oh, next slide, Ron. We've had past epidemics like SARS. We've had Ebola. They never hit the United States. So for those of us in the United States, this is really the first time we're coming into contact with the fact that there have been epidemics and they're increasing in number and severity. We got to be patient with ourselves in figuring this out emotionally. How do we deal with this? How do we think about ourselves, the family? Because we got to learn more about the nature of these epidemics and the implications, and we're all learning together. So let's have some patience around that. When I was a preschool teacher many years ago, the teacher in the 2-year-old classroom where we had plenty of meltdowns going on, let me tell you, he had a big sign that went all the way across, a big banner across the room that says, remember at all times, we're all doing the best we can at any given moment, including you. Right? That even each of us, while our kids are trying to do the best they can, our colleagues, everyone's trying to do their best, including ourselves. And so having that patience has got to be the first step in the self-care. Allow yourself to recognize we just don't have answers yet. The second is relying on our past coping skills. We've been through stress before, And I know this is unprecedented, but we have been through stress before, and we know that there's ways we've had to cope. Let's reflect on that. Let's learn back to some of the things we've done in the past and see whether or not some of those skill sets are things that we can rely on now. So I think it's a really helpful reminder. The third one on this page, learning how to learn. It's really about, we've got skills related to managing through COVID. We need to think about that. We need to think about what are the skill sets we need to be developing, and we'll get there in a minute. But what we see here is that, in fact, learning new strategies for coping with stress, learning new teaching strategies as educators. I know our school counselors are trying to figure out how am I going to learn how to learn to do my whole career development and SEL work within a virtual environment. These are skills I've had as a professor. I've had to learn how am I going to bring my classroom into a Zoom environment, and how am I going to do synchronous and asynchronous, right? Some online work as well as in person. Having to learn it all, and there's something positive about that that gives us a sense of power to manage through the situation. So I know it's hard, and we can be frustrated and angry that we have to learn, but the reality is there's some really important benefits that can occur as well. And so there's some readings here that you'll have in the resources to help us take a look at that. Next slide. I think, yep. One of the things I also wanted to, say here is, looking at my notes as I'm getting out of place, is, I want to do a couple more thoughts on this too. I want you in your Zoom file to get ready to put something down, and this is coming from Nick from Castle. He's one of the great experts over there, and he starts each of his Zoom meetings by having each of us write in the chat box, what are we doing differently right now to kind of improve ourselves, manage through, and just deal with the COVID situation. So I want you each to kind of throw down something. And as you do that, I'm going to throw down what I've been doing, and I'm going to ask Ron to do the same. It's such a wonderful wellness check and easy to do when we're having our meetings. So for me, I'm sitting right now on a yoga ball. You can see me bouncing up and down. I've got the yoga ball in place. I'm sitting so much that my lower back has been in pain, and so I'm thinking I'm going to try this, and it's been fun. But I'm also working with my boxing crew. We got them on Zoom right away. We're meeting now 4 times a week. They're crazy. They are just, I think 5 times this week. You're doing weight training and boxing, but it's been such a great feeling that something that was important to me I can gain back. I'll just give a quick shout out to a really interesting, creative, and wonderful person, Peter Esterland. He owns this Marblehead Coastal Kung Fu, and he's offering free streaming for hour-long workouts. So you can be with other people and do workouts, and people you've never met before. These are happening all over the country, and I just think these are the fun things we can do. I also made a big commitment this week, and his name is Harold Darrell Gerald. It turns out that I named him Harold, my son named him Darrell, and my daughter named him Gerald, so we had to bring it all together. But it's making a sourdough starter from scratch. And I'll tell you, I was always concerned about the commitment, and now I'm looking at my life saying, well, what else am I going to do, right? So now I can commit to trying to do the sourdough. So we're on day 6. He's coming along fine, and we're quite excited. So I see lots of chat box stuff coming in. I'm seeing walks. I'm seeing Netflix. I'm seeing, walking the dog back. Those dogs, the animals are loving this, I got to say, right? I mean, I've heard some say the animals are like concerned, why are you taking my space? But for the most part, they're loving it. Ron, what do you have going on?
Yeah,
also, if they can go back on mute, please, that would be great.
Yeah, if you're unmuted, just go ahead and please mute. I'll share real quickly. I usually work from home, so in some sense that is part of my routine. But I think the biggest thing for us, my wife is a teacher out here in Denver Public Schools. We're transitioning to, or have already transitioned to, full-time remote learning. So my wife is here trying to navigate that. We've got our 2 young kids also, at home. And so I think the biggest thing for us has been organizing our time. We've been, syncing our calendars. So, my wife knows that, I'm on a webinar right now, so the kids aren't running in screaming. But that routine and kind of organizing time has been big for us. Putting time on to exercise. I will work out at this time, and you'll have the kids, and then I will, we'll kind of switch, and just making sure that our kids have that routine as well has been key for us in trying to navigate this. And finding activities. We can look at what we can do. We can go for walks with our kids and trying to find out how we can kind of, add enjoyment to that and do scavenger hunts with them and things like that. So finding little activities, using the internet, looking for resources has also helped.
Awesome. And it's been great to have family dinners. So one of my colleagues yesterday was saying, does it feel like Thanksgiving every day? We're having to wash the dishes twice nowadays. It's just amazing what goes on. So anyway, again, reminding you to mute if you've just come on, and we're going to continue on through. I love the options. I love the fact, the virtual church, we've got to find ways to connect with our social networks, and I love hearing that people are doing a lot of that. It's great. So excellent. Let's move on to the next piece. You got to limit exposure to negative. Oh, no, go back one. I'm sorry, Ron. We've got to limit exposure to the negativity. This is really, I want to give you the headlines. So first of all, it's become clear that COVID-19 is a crisis, just in case you were wondering. The news has one theme, it's really bad. And at this point, most of the media continues to just give us the myriad of ways in which it's really bad. So you're not going to miss much if you take the day off from the news. Or maybe for me, I may watch it for a little bit or do my quick little look through the headlines in the morning. Don't need it at night. Do not be looking at this negative news at night. Your body's going to take it to sleep, and it's not going to be helpful. So the other thing is, you can do this as an experiment. You can do a mood experiment, and I saw some in the chat box also already saying yes. But the Good News Network, John Krasinski's Some Good News, it's uplifting. It's amazing, and I know I'm going to talk for the United States, but, we've got some powerful things going on in our country right now. As people are no longer relying on waiting for the government to help, they're out there using their companies to innovate masks. And one of my students, Yan Ling, got her friends from China to send masks to her so she could get them to the Boston Public Schools. It's amazing to be able to see such amazing, positive, community-wide effort going on. We're not going to hear it if we're going to listen to the news. So let's link in to some of these other positive visions of what's happening. It helps us feel better. It helps us manage and feel a sense of hope that there are some amazing people out there doing amazing things, and maybe there's some ways we can join in. So really want to put the kibosh on the negativity. Next one, Ron. So finding ways to control your space and daily routine. This is huge. One of my colleagues from this is actually from Sociedad Latina, was talking about how he starts his day by just making his bed. And it's for him, that's his maintaining a sense of control. I'm going to this is the first step of the day, and once I've got that done, my wife has been taking her daily run, and when she does, she comes back feeling so much better that she's done something positive for herself to start the day. It's at little bits of gaining that sense of control back. We've got people that are suffering through multiple roommate situations in small places, and we had one of them talking about how they redesigned their apartment so that the living room became the workout space, and that they were able to now share in this space in a different way. Even though there might be a television, it's no longer the primary. The primary is it's a space for movement and motion. In our basement, it was a makeover to create the gym so we can do the workouts, but my wife also took our bedroom upstairs and made it into an office space. And even though you're looking at the window from Zoom, what she's looking at are my clothes on the bed. And I know she's got this adage basically that I have this quote down here. A husband who cleans remains a husband indeed. And while she's never said that directly, I know she believes it. So I'm just shouting out that we've got some roommate issues we've all got to attend to through this as well. That's part of the routine. We need our routines to help build this in. And on the sheet that you're going to get, you're going to see all of these links to all of these resources here. Wonderful kinds of reading and ideas and different things about how we can start taking control. But the other thing I want to suggest is we also got to start setting our own short-term and daily goals, right? And I like the Google Doc. I like having a list of the day of the things I hope to do, and then I can see if I accomplish something. It's really hard when there's so many things to do to make ourselves feel like we're not getting anything done, when in fact we are. So let's take time in this kind of routine to start putting together short-term goals, and as we accomplish them, give ourselves credit. Give ourselves the big thumbs up for that. Next one. Love all the chat stuff going on, you guys. This is awesome. Ways to control, managing worry. Oh boy, here we go. So, and I have dear friends for whom hopefully they're listening. Worry, right? We worry about things, and we have those of us that are professional worriers. And I've got our Mental Health America, and I've got our psychologist locator up again, because I think it's really important that if you're worrying so much that you're not able to get your work done, or you're spending significant amounts of time figuring out every negative thing that can occur, we got to put a kibosh to that, because it's not helpful. It's not giving you the positive energy you need to get focused. And I know this is a part of your own dynamic that you've had for a long time, but we've got to help our friends, we've got to help our colleagues and even our children and ourselves, our loved ones, start taking a look at what catastrophic thinking is about and start looking at some self-care plans. But I also believe, and it's hard, this is one of those areas where reaching out to a professional is really, really important, because you're convinced and you've got all the evidence to support your worry is relevant and reasonable, and I've done a lot of work with anxiety disorder, so I know that for which I speak. It takes someone to help, just the gentle kind of challenging of questioning, just to help bring it down to more of a what's a likelihood scenario, right? What's really some probability. So please, if worrying is an issue, and if you've got some parents that are in this worry state, they're going to pass it to their children, we're going to talk about creating stability at home. We may first need to work on the worry. So let's definitely look at that. And then our own self-care plan. This is my favorite section. So we need to think about the different ways that we're nurturing ourselves. Counselors, you all know about mindfulness and the importance of mindfulness, and those in the education field, this is a really important thing for us to start applying to ourselves, taking some time, clearing our heads. Sleep, major issue, got to focus on that. I grew up in a family of bad sleepers, and so I've had to really, I look at my night as, did I get through to 1 a.m.? Did I get through to 4 a.m.? If I made it to 5, woohoo! I mean, it's just and focusing on not getting up too early and trying to get that good sleep is really important, and so certainly trying to get the relaxation and different pieces on that. Learning to breathe better, and those of us that have done the yoga, we've done the meditation, we know about breathing. If we've done any kind of cognitive behavior therapy, and I've both been involved as a client as well as a therapist, we know that breathing is really critical, and it really helps bring down that kind of intense emotional feeling. So starting to focus on our breathing is really important. The self-nurturing, right? Are we doing things that are really positive for us? Really important to be thinking about the ways in which we can self-nurture. Again, talking about my wife, it's gardening, right? When she gets out in the garden, and my youngest son is now starting the day with, hey, let's go see what's in the garden. Let's go check that out. It's sort of the positive things we do for ourselves because we value and we want to bring that in. So making that part of our plan. I've been practicing yoga lately, especially with the increase in workouts. I have to do yoga in order to get out of bed sometimes. It is very painful. So, but the yoga has been great, and breathing and yoga is such an important thing to realize how much tension we hold in our bodies. And for those of you that aren't ready to start doing the heavy exercise, yoga is amazing, and you've got a list here about the health benefits that are going on with that. And also, and we saw some people putting it in your chat, and thank you, diet. Really taking control of the situation. It's a great time to start looking at our diets. We've been eating a lot more vegetarian. I've been learning I do all the cooking in the house, so I've been really pushing myself to learn things like how to do falafel from scratch, how to do some Indian foods which have complex flavors, but taking a shot at making it happen. So it's trying to come up with really healthy, nutritious food at a time when we know that our immune system and the strength of our immune system is critical for making it through this process. So those are some of the big areas around the self-care plan, and basically writing this out. What are you all going to work on as a family? What are you going to work on personally? And kind of making some commitments to yourself about some of these things that you want to add in. And if you've got some in here that we forgot to put down, throw them down in the chat box, because we'd love to hear about some of these other ideas as well. Next one is support and connection. Social support is important for our health. We have researchers that have worked with breast cancer survivors, and when you have a supportive relationship at home, you get better faster. It's amazing. It's magic. The power that this has in supporting our wellness and well-being. It's about the strength of our perceived availability of support, and when we're in uncertainty, having that availability, knowing there are people there if I need it, helps buffer the negative impact. The grief response is not as strong when I know I've got this relational base. So when I saw the whole, virtually connecting with church, connecting with our groups and different things, so important to make sure that I've got those strong relationships. We've got a couple of publications just to help you recognize that this needs to be part of your resiliency strategy, because it is about resiliency. So we've got a few pieces on there. Also be aware, we've got some people in our lives, I'm not mentioning names because I'm not talking about anyone on this call, but there are times when we have people who may be a little more negative, right? The ones that have just not talking positive about things. And when we go to reach out and we're looking for them to say something positive, it doesn't necessarily come out positive. Got to be careful on that, because we do know that when you receive support that's not positive, it can have a negative effect. It can increase our feelings of depression, the feelings of hopelessness. So that's a big challenge. Somebody wrote in the chat box, by the way, for resiliency and new things, start a new hobby. Absolutely. New time. Do new things. Absolutely. Thank you. So now let's go to the next one, and that is really, we're going to hit it again, and we're going to hit it often. And that is reach out if you're needing, if you're realizing through this, or as you're starting as school counselors, as you're reaching out to your families and you're reaching out to colleagues, make sure that the help resources are right there front and center. Loving what they're doing in Boston and what Marcia's group at the Boston Public Schools, they put out a beautiful one. I put the link, I added last night to our resource list, just a beautiful example of here's the resources in the Boston area you can go to and people that are there to help and support. So we may need to be thinking in our local areas, and if you're in a rural area, let's figure out where those support systems might be, even if people need to reach out nationally. But we got to make sure people can see that this is part of self-care. It's a personal resource to have someone to talk to during these times, someone who can help us think a little bit differently or let us give some ideas about what we can do as we're working through it. So on that. Now, part one we did was about just recognizing this is a grief piece. Part two was all about you and needing to help you build your own self-care as a resiliency strategy. That's been critical. As we move to the next slide, we're going to part three. And part three now is how do we start supporting our students, for those of you that are working in the school settings, our parents, and even if you're working in schools, your parents as well. We gotta think about some of the things we can do for them. And I basically went to this Child Trends resource. I like a number of the topics that they talked about. If you want to go to the next slide, Ron, we can see what some of these topics are. And so what I want to do is kind of think through now as we transition away from just focusing on ourselves and now what do we need to be doing to support our children. Here are some of the big key themes, right? And reassurance and stability. We're going to go through each of these one by one, but can't stress enough that we need stability. They need a sense of stability. And I know we're not feeling it, but they need to feel it so they can hold on as they're going through. We talked about us developing new skills. Guess what? They need to as well. And it's going to give them resiliency by helping develop their new skills. And so my son helping in the garden, watching my daughter have conversations with elected officials as they're doing the Earth Day, on their own, doing an Earth Day effect, and having amazing student leaders that are emerging in the high school, leading the effort to talk with them and coming away from those conversations, feeling a sense of power and a sense of influence. These are new skill sets that we want all of our children to be growing. So we look for those ways. But at home, it means doing new chores, the new routine. So we'll talk about each of those. Why don't you go on to the next one, and we'll hit some of those there. So the first big one then is we really need to think about this idea of reassurance and safety. Children need to know they're going to be okay, and I know it doesn't feel good, and I know the unemployment, and I know the housing and the food and all that, but we still got to give a reassurance and sensibility that we're going to find a way to work through it, okay? So going back through all of those self-care areas that we did for ourselves, we can actually go back and refer to some of those and think about how they can apply with our children. So having them build a routine, having them build some self-care plans as well. Next slide. Developing new routines. You know what? It turns out that there's a whole group of people out there that have been doing this for a long time, right? All of the homeschoolers. And so I went to some resources, and they're out there to support you, and they're writing things to say, hey, here's how we've been working from home and doing homeschooling. Let's learn from them. Let's figure out how they're designing their routines with their children in a way that helps them move through and manage what's going on. You know what? We're not the first and we're not the only group to be focused on remote learning. And so you've got this international schools piece because they've got parents who are taking their children internationally, and they got to do remote learning from all over the world. Let's learn from them. How did they make this work, right? So I threw in some things that are not your normal kinds of areas that you may not know about, but I believe that they have some exciting answers and ideas that you might find really helpful. So please definitely take a look at that. Next slide. And then I know I saved this for down the way. I didn't want to lead with this because this is a big anxiety point in my community as well. The fact that we are now needing to become educators as parents. We are homeschooling. You can call it remote learning, but we're the ones setting the schedule. We're the ones trying to interpret what the different things are that need to be done. We're feeling anxious as parents that if we don't do this well, our children will now be behind. Okay, that is a huge pressure to put on ourselves, and so stop it. Okay, let's stop that first of all. That's not good self-care. And yet I know it's a pressure point. It's absolutely a pressure point. So we need to start redesigning ourselves in education as well as on the parenting end to collaborate around these academics. And there are supports. So I'm showing you this beautiful piece on COVID-19 parents, which has a whole bunch of resources and ideas that you can use, a lot more than what I'm showing on this screen that you might use. Khan Academy is a really important resource. One of the things that Castle was shared with me and I found really concerning is that the biggest risk we have for student learning right now is around 3rd to 8th grade. Those are the ones where if they're going to lose a whole year, it's a significant loss. Khan Academy has reached out with curriculum from preschool through 12, and they are looking at math, especially in the 3 to 8th grade sectors. It's free. It's designed to support. Let's figure out how we can align this, right? We need to know from our schools what are the grade level expectations to get ready for that next year. We've got all summer to lean into this. Let's not be panicked that we've only got a few more weeks of school and it still may be unclear. Let's figure out how we can rely on some of these other areas. It means we have to learn how to learn. It means we have to hope I would love as school counselors get these kind of conversations to help parents learn from each other about how they're doing it. We're starting it in our community, exactly that, little short 10-minute bits to try to help through and just think about some solution strategies. So it's really, I'm not making it sound like it's easy. It's not. It's really hard, but this is an area where we're going to have to change our practice. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, but I recognize there's a lot of stress in terms of how we get this done. And I'm sure there's going to be I'm seeing a lot of chat kinds of conversation. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about when we get to the Q&A. Remote learning, right? We got to learn how to do that. So again, this COVID-19 learning keeps going. They've got wonderful resources on the remote learning, this homeschooling piece. I put in a few other areas too, teaching through a pandemic, this idea of needing to look at how we're changing. New America has a whole piece on it, and then OECD. So our European and colleagues all around the world that are focusing on this have some ideas as well. So just throwing things up to help us get our own sense of what we need to be doing, as well as some tips on how we might be able to do it. Certainly look through those, and if you find some better, please let's get those shared out. So really, really important. Next slide. All right, so got to help our children develop these new skills. This is coming back to this whole Child Trends had a nice piece about why increasing children's self-efficacy is critical. It's about agency and control. And when they can learn new self-efficacy around new tasks, it helps them feel in control over the whole experience of COVID. So we need to be thinking about that. I know that in the work that I do with Graduation Alliance, it's on the scholar-centric side of things, we built a resiliency assessment, and one of the things that came out was we've got kids that are coming out with a sense of danger, a sense that they're at risk when they're the highest performing students. And we've got to recognize in those cases, these were the valedictorians, and yet they were still having struggles. They were homeless. They might have been having suicidal challenges, and depression. That we need to help think about our children in terms of how we're going to help build their confidence to manage just their day-to-day lives, certainly the academic, the emotional. We've got to be thinking through that and being open to the fact that there's a lot of challenge. Next one. Virtual Social Connections. This is a wonderful publication. Again, it'll be in your list. This is from our national PTA. And some of you are already doing it. You're using Netflix, but the idea that you can have a Netflix party where all of our, high school students can be watching a movie together. My son is teaching his friends how to get online so they can do gaming together and just have some social time and fun time together. So there's a whole lot of ways in which we can build those connections, and we've already talked about the importance of social support. They need it as well. And so let's certainly think about how we can get this on. Everything we're talking about here is going to be available to you after the webinar. I see somebody was asking. You're going to have access to a 7-page resource document that goes through everything I'm saying, because I'm actually using it as the outline. So you're going to have lots of, even more resources than I might have described or shown you in pictures, and you'll also have the PowerPoints. You'll have plenty, you will definitely have all of this as we go through. Next slide. So really important, we've got a number of children, about 20%, and with disabilities, and that means they're on an IEP. Accommodations, getting support, really a struggle. And for us as parents, I work with, I'm part of our community in Marblehead that does the special ed advisory for our district. It's part of a state law that we have this. I've got Steve who's on our call today, who's our leader of our group. And we are working really hard to help our district as well as our parents think about what resources we need to survive, because it's really hard. When you have a child who already has problems attending, and I'm working, how am I able to get them on target and learn when I'm feeling all this pressure now and the fear of loss about their academics? Really, really hard. So we need lots of open conversation. We need lots of reassurance for that community. But we also need lots of learning. So counselors and other leaders, we need the dialogue. We need to make sure we keep an open conversation. We're trying to do that in our community, and I know Steve's really helping usher that in. But it's really valuable to let people know we're going to support one another through this. So please, for children with special needs, really huge. I know that we've got immigrant families that are also extremely at risk, and I know Boston, when you get the resource list, look at the Boston, they did a wonderful job of just identifying resources for immigrants. Think about how that might apply within your own community. Very important. Our English language learners, how are we getting everything in Spanish, or at least getting the Google Translate going and other things so they can get access to these materials? We've got lots of communities we need to support, and I realize there's a lot of us that are in a very privileged setting, but we've got to be thinking broadly as we go. Next slide. And I'm going to say this is the last piece before we go to Q&A. So a lot of our school counselors are on the call from states I'm very familiar with, and I've worked with a number of you, a number of the states, as well as a lot of you in the schools around this whole individualized learning plan. For those who aren't aware, it's a way of helping our youth start driving their own sense of relevancy of school, because it aligns to career and life goals. We're going to call it about establishing hope and about future readiness. This comes directly from my colleague in South Africa, Gloria, who's on the call today, that I'm no longer calling it career development. I'm calling it really about becoming future ready, because we don't know what the future is going to hold, but we've got to help our youth gain a sense of hope. And so these kind of personalized learning processes that are going on, and every state's got different names, and all the states that are here, nearly all of you, are involved in this kind of work, from South Carolina to Wisconsin, Alaska, Arizona. You've all got different names like ECAP, ACP, MyCap from Massachusetts. What I want you to think about is we can start using this period of time and help our parents in the process to start helping you think about their mission and goals, right? Life mission, meaning what kind of impact do I want to have? The world is falling apart around them. What kind of change do they want to make? And then we can help them start looking for the occupations and the areas in which they can make a difference, right? It's about their talent development. It's about seeing the talent they have and seeing where it can apply. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because they can't wait for education to stabilize. They have to continue learning how to learn through this process, and they have to be acquiring the skills that they need to be able to transition into adulthood. We need them to start realizing what's at stake so they can start getting into the Khan Academy. They can start looking at their local two-year college and perhaps do some early college activities. Now, our colleagues at Castle, this is an amazing resource. Carol Nemi, the executive director, was on this COVID so fast. And they've organized and mobilized, and they're doing amazing work. Dana's on the phone. You can't imagine what they're doing at the national level to support us on this. So they've got a beautiful resource that lists a whole bunch of different things. Go to their site when you get the brief. My book is a wonderful option, too, if you've got some time to read. It sounds like I did see a few people saying they want to take up reading. Here's a nice book. It's short. It'd be fun. But it really explains the whole process in a way that is a nice one-stop. But we also have my colleagues that worked with me, and they're amazing, and really taught me how to do this webinar, how to take our research and translate into practice through info briefs and different things from the National Collaborative of Workforce and Development, but also the Institute for Education and Leadership. So we put their site and briefs up for the work that we did there. I'm looking at my last notes here. So a couple things I just want to say. Please use this. When you get a chance to look at the brief, you're going to have a Word version because all the links are live. Take it. You want to take pieces of it and put it into your own work, please do. It's a free access. It would be nice if you could cite, and I gave you a little citation you could use in that. That would be awesome. But really, this is about triage. It's about helping you think about different things. You can find more community-specific resources that might be available. Absolutely, but you can see the kinds of things you might look for and things that might be there. So definitely keep this as an open conversation. Ron and I are open if you want to redo this webinar conversation with a key group in your community. We can do that. We realize that we've got 600 people perhaps on the phone. I don't know. I can't see you all, but there's a lot of people of interest, obviously, and so if there's a need to want to redo this in different areas and places, yes, and certainly you've got the materials so you can do it on your own as well if you want to have these conversations. And just to summarize our key points then, let's recognize that we have a major stressor, and as a result, there's a lot of grief and loss, and we need to be vigilant for ourselves as well as for our colleagues, for our students, for our families, that for many it's going to shift over to a traumatic experience, and we need to be able to support them and make sure we have resources that they can get. And school counselors, you're the wraparound specialist, and this is why you're on the call, because you know this. And I'm so excited, and I'm also so proud to be training school counselors because I really believe that this is why we're here, is to become that community support, and it's just awesome that so many of you are on the call. Managing stress is about what it's about. We've got to manage through this. We've got to develop new skills. We've got to focus on our confidence. We've got to give ourselves permission to really mess up and step up and do it again. Yet tried to make that first tiki masala in the Instapot, and it literally did crash and burn. It was awful. Got to step back into it, right? Got to keep learning, even the silly stuff. We got to keep giving ourselves permission and patience with ourselves to get through this. And then once we've taken care of ourselves and we're feeling like we've got that energy, now we can start really focusing on our students, not adding to children the more pressure, but coming up with solution strategies, management, taking the pressure off of them, letting them have the struggles as well. And then throughout it all, patience with ourselves and our colleagues, educators is really key. So with that, we're gonna pause. Certainly put comments and let us know how this went for you, because this is new for us to kind of do something big on this scale. We're so excited there was such a reception, and then we're really going to be open. I think Ron, you're going to jump back in as well, and I think we're going to pause the recording, and I've got time. I mean, I know we have an hour listed, but if some of you need to stay on, we're going to stay on. I've got nothing behind this, so I think Ron and I are willing to listen and hear the kinds of questions you might have about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Dr. Solberg mentioned, I'll stop the recording, but we're going to stick on. We're going to monitor the chat box and keep answering those questions. But we want to thank you guys all for joining during these challenging times, and we're glad to see all the chats coming in with all the value that you guys are seeing. So thank you guys for attending, and again, we'll stick on for those that have additional questions. Thank you.